Hello everybody, this is Toylawyer, and today we're going to be doing the Hell Ember Matchup Guide. So, what is the Hell Ember Matchup Guide? Well, I'm going to teach you how to fight every survivor currently up till Meteorologist. Now, why do you need to know how to fight each of the survivors? Well, it is because if you understand who can exploit whose weakness first, that can allow you to climb up the ranks. A good example is if you know that you can exploit one survivor, but one survivor can exploit your weaknesses, I think it would be a better idea to go and exploit the weaknesses of the survivor you are advantageous towards. So we're going to go down the list of the survivors and figure out between all of your summons and the phantoms, the puppets, and Leo himself, who has an advantage, who has a disadvantage, who can kind of get away on both sides, or depending on which player is better, or their interactions aren't really that game changing. And I also have an exclusive part for people who don't really know matchups and don't really know how to make their gameplay strategies. So, with that, let's begin the Hell Ember Matchup Guide. Now, most survivors I have seen tend to fall into one of these 6 categories. Category 1 is the stunners. It's very obvious to tell when a survivor is going to be a stunner, as they will have effects that purposely prevent you from performing any actions. Whether it be something very clear and transparent as forward dashing into you to stop you from moving, or something less interactive like Antiquarian performing the disarm to allow you to not perform any basic attacks. A stunner's job is to prevent the hunter from doing any actions. So, the best way to counter any upcoming stunners is to make sure that the phantom takes the damage for you. The puppets can aid you as well, but they're not as reliant due to the tamper effect, so you need to rely on the phantom to block the stuns or allow them to give you breathing room. The second group I've seen from survivors is known as the dashers. The dashers are the opposite of the stunners. While the stunners want to get in your range and prevent you from moving, the dashers are on the complete opposite side of the scale. Dashers want to run away from you and keep outrunning your pace. Best example for a dasher is Weeping Clown, Patience Hooks, Composer and Cheerleader's main gimmick, and any other survivor that has a sudden burst of speed. Puppets can help you quickly regain any distance that a dasher takes when they use their ability, but be careful. If you do not have any puppets, a dasher will literally run circles around you. Both you and the phantom will be way too slow to catch up with most of the dancers if they play their cards correctly. So you need to have your puppets nearby you or at the ready to be able to take back the ground that they are trying to give. The third category I've seen, which is a little bit rarer than the other two, but in my personal opinion, can really turn the tide of battle if you do not know that they are there, is the tricksters. What is a trickster, you may ask? Well, a tricksters are survivors whose main gimmick is to turn the tide of battle from the sidelines. A good example is Gardner being able to break the rocket chairs, Postman being able to give his teammates unique buffs, or Seer giving the owl to his teammates. Each of these 3 survivors do not need to be near anybody. Their effects work fundamentally in the background, and by the time you realize, it should be already too late. When there is a trickster on the team, you need to make sure that at any moment, their hidden techniques will come out, and then it may turn the tide of battle when you least expect it. If you want to deal with tricksters, you do need to keep an eye on whether or not they are using their abilities, if their abilities are on and off cooldown, and what exactly they could have been doing when they are not in the spotlight. Just like how you're able to throw around your heartbeat, tricksters do the exact same thing to you, using their own teammates as a distraction to perform their duties in the background. The 4th type of category I've been seeing in survivors is the tanks. This group should be very self-explanatory because of the examples I will provide. Seer with his owl. Mercenary's entire gimmick. Ada with her first stack of sanity. Gardener with her shield. First officer whenever he pops a pocket watch. What do all of these characters have in common? They can eat a lot of basic attacks and walk out completely unscathed. Tank characters solely rely around eating damage. And I do mean eating damage. Their main point is that they have a ton of HP, which allows it so that they can take those hits and walk out completely fine. They may be wounded, but being wounded is a lot better than being downed. If you want to counteract these tanks, you need to play around their boost of HP. Maybe it might be wearing them down slowly over the course of the match, waiting for their tankiness to expire to put them back into their normal HP state. When you are fighting a tank, they're going to be a lot stronger and can charge and perform a lot more risky plays without having to worry about the repercussions. The 5th type of group I am seeing from the survivors as well is the controller archetype. The controller archetype mostly works around using their abilities to create massive amounts of space or fortifying areas such as very strong loops to aid their teammates. Prime example would be Acrobat's bombs, female dancers' music boxes. You can also include Prisoner's electroshock cipher machine, because yes, I have seen prisoners use that. Anything works. The main idea about controllers, as the 3 I just mentioned, is that they use their abilities to make a large opening or lock down an area similar to how you would lock down rocket chairs. The best example I will say is Female Dancer, who has the ability to supercharge or slow down any area she places her music boxes on. If you do want to know how to counter a controller type survivor if they ever get released, it is to try to counteract when they are able to place their items or claim the space before they're able to set up their abilities. If their abilities are instant, such as Acrobat's bombs, knowing how to swap up your movement on the fly and tiptoe over the traps that they seem to set will allow you to maybe sneak a bit of damage in. But the main ability is you are going to be playing a tug of war versus these controllers. You are basically going to be playing a game of turf war against these controllers. If you have the turf, you will be able to sweep the team. If the controllers take the battlefield, you're gonna be in a huge world of hurt. And finally, the sixth type of survivor I've been seeing is the shadow type survivor. What is a shadow type survivor? Well, shadow type survivors are very funny. Prime examples of shadow type survivors is Mind's Eye, Lawyer, Explorer. Most of these tend to be the decoders, but there are some other survivors as well. Memory is a non-decoder that fits this description. If you could not guess, shadow archetypes get their value from not being noticed in the first place. For a good shadow archetype to be effective, you essentially have to forget their existence. So the best way to counter them is to put them in the spotlight. Some of them do have ways to keep themselves hidden from the hunter's point of view, such as the map, Explorer being able to hide in small cracks in corners of the map, Mind's Eye having the equivalent of wall hacks, and Memory, if you are unable to put her in her terror radius, is able to warp around the map. Dealing with each of these kinds of survivors, whether it be the already present ones or any upcoming survivors that you need to already start formulating a battle plan, if you can put these survivors in a group, this will effectively help speed up the process of how to counter each survivor. The reason I'm putting this is just in case this guide becomes very outdated. I want to make sure that no matter when you watch this video, you will at least have a good understanding of any survivor that comes into this manner, how to counter each and every one of them. Because the best way to improve your gameplay is to study your opponent, know what they're going to do, and try to figure out weak points in their strategy. I'm making these types of survivor groups so that it can be easier for newer Hell Embers to quickly pinpoint starting strategies to use when dealing with a survivor they have no interactions with. But other than that, let's go down the list of all the survivors and see how we can counter them as Hell Ember. I'm going to be setting up a small little versus screen with Hell Ember, the puppets, and the Phantom to see who has an advantage and who has a disadvantage versus each of them. Up first, it is Lucky Guy, and Lucky Guy on paper seems like a very boring survivor. He just has the ability to wish for an item, and he has no buffs and no debuffs. But if you're thinking that, you just fallen for his trap. Lucky Guy secretly has a perfect ace up his sleeve, and you fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Lucky Guy's true main ability is his ability to become any survivor at any point in the match. Lucky Guy has the ability to wish for his items, which means he does not truly have any sort of game plan, meaning you have to think right on your feet because his strategy appears at the same time you are seeing it. Could Lucky Guy be a decoder Lucky Guy with a mechanics controller, forcing you to have to deal with a makeshift mechanic? Does he have a pocket watch, forcing you to have to deal with a makeshift first officer? Does he have a travel journal, making it so that he's able to sneak within your defenses without you even knowing? Lucky Guy will always be swapping items at all points during the match. You need to know what items he has wished for and how many times he is using those wishes. Because if you do not, Lucky Guy will confuse you and you will be unable to deal with his chaotic nature. If you really want to deal with a Lucky Guy, you have to get rid of all of the books that you have been learning and learn how to think fully on the fly. You cannot truly fully optimize Identity V because characters such as Lucky Guy can exploit that. So if you really need to counter this Lucky Guy, sometimes you gotta think with your gut and not your brain. The best way to truly counter Lucky Guy, as I keep saying over and over and over again, trust your gut, as Lucky Guy teaches you how to adapt on the fly. Up next, it is Doctor, who has the simple ability of healing herself. But don't think that this simple heal is something to scoff at, because anytime she has breathing room in those chases, she will heal the damage. While she only heals half of a hit state, you still need to take her fully down. And as I say, there is no such thing as a wounded doctor. If you keep playing defensively, she will never go down, as those times that you are unable to attack her, she will quickly heal herself back up to full. Every time she rescues from the rocket chair, she will be at full health. So if you truly want to counter a doctor, you need to play very aggressively with your puppets and your phantoms. You need to make sure that she is unable to start healing herself with a syringe, as even the action of the doctor tampering with your puppets can allow you to get that small, tiny window of opportunity to charge right in and deal the killing blow. My personal opinion is that the puppets and the phantom have a huge advantage on the doctor, but you have an average counterplay against the doctor. The phantoms and the puppets can bypass through pallets very efficiently, as the phantom will keep charging the doctor, allowing you to walk through the pallet as he is breaking it, or you can toss a puppet completely over the pallets and or walls and landing directly in front of the doctor. If you truly want to make sure no doctors exist in your game, you have to make sure that she is completely dead. If she has even the tiniest bit of health, rest assured she'll come back stronger, she'll come back faster, and she'll always come back with full health. Because Doctor teaches you how to play aggressive. Up next, it is the Lawyer, and his ability started off very small, but just like Hell Ember, he got a massive buff that completely changed the way he plays. Lawyer gained the ability to get an additional movement speed, decoding speed, and vaulting speed whenever he performs those given actions. This makes him start off, just like you, as a very weak threat in the early game, but the second he gets his power spike, it can turn him into a nuisance that allows him to sweep the endgame if you let him be. This is a prime example of a shadow archetype survivor, as if you put Lawyer in the spotlight, he cannot gain his abilities until the endgame, but by the time the endgame rolls around, you have already swept his teammates. The thing with Lawyer's main ability is that every time he decodes, he slowly gets increased decoding speed. Every time he takes a step, he gets movement speed at a very slow rate, and every time he vaults a brand new window, he gets additional vaulting speed. He also can hold his map out to see your aura at any given time, and double the effects of all his given buffs. That means if he opens his map at full movement speed, he becomes a very fast survivor that you have to deal with. If you truly want to KO this lawyer and make sure he doesn't sneak the wind underneath you like he did Martha Beck. You need to make sure that he is in your line of sight, and you know exactly what he is doing at every given time. You can either take him out early to make sure he doesn't get that power creep, or you can take a small little gamble and take out his team before he's able to carry the endgame. Because Lawyer teaches you how to keep eyes on your given targets. Up next, it is Thief, the starter harasser of the basic 4. He is a very tough survivor if he knows how to play his character correctly. He has 2 sets of abilities on his flashlight alone, and that is the blind effect that you all know, where shining in your face will cause you to be blinded and stunned for a few seconds. But he also has the ability that if he shines his flashlight on you from any direction, you will lose your abilities. And versus a Hell Ember with no blink and no puppets and phantoms, this may make you a very easy target to K. He also has the ability that if you were to break a pallet, he can place a flashlight directly in front of you so that you get blinded while he is running off. Knowing how to deal with a good thief might be a difficult challenge, but all you need to do is make sure that your eyes are not getting blinded by his light, and to make sure that you can kite without your abilities. Thief, in my personal opinion, is just like the Hell Ember archetype. Most people started that thinking that he was just a troll character. And after a small amount of buffs and how dedicated his mains can be, he can prove that even the lowest tier survivors can be just as devastating as the meta. If you truly want to deal with a thief, you best know that he is not going to make sure that you have your abilities for a majority of the game. And those pro thieves take him very seriously, just as you should with your Hell Ember yourself. So if you truly want to make sure that thief doesn't steal your win away, stay out of his line of sight, get in, get that kill, and fight alongside your team before it's too late. Up next is little Lisa Beck. She is a tiny child who wants to give Oh, I'm very sorry. I seem to have gotten the wrong script. Miss Emma Woods is the starter support hero. Sorry, it seems that I have misinterpreted yet again. Up next is Emma Woods, the support survivor. Emma Woods can break rocket chairs, forcing you to have to walk to them and repair them yourself. If she breaks a rocket chair in front of you, you will be forced to have to drop the survivor you are carrying. With this added amount of time, survivors can turn the tide of battle by popping the last cipher machine, or giving that last amount of struggle percent to break them free. You do get a loud notification when Gardner breaks any of the rocket chairs, regardless of distance. So if you do hear a loud sound alert, just be sure that Gardner has just broken one of your rocket chairs. Gardner also gains protection from your main Hell Ember. If she stands still for a few seconds, she will get an added shield that will take 1 health state worth of damage. This allows her to combine with her first ability to allow her to walk directly in front of you, break a rocket chair, and walk out scot-free. But be warned, you can in fact hit her out of this effect, but at one horrid cost. The next time she goes to draw upon the strength of her father, the speed will increase equal to the amount of time left when you hit her out of the shield gaining animation. Meaning, if you happen to hit her at the final frames before the completion of the shield, she will have a frame 1 shield. So be warned, if you go for that swing, you're just strengthening her in the later part of the matches. If you truly want to deal with a gardener, you need to keep track of objectives like the rocket shares, as Emma herself will teach you how to track them without having to fully focus on them. Because in order to counter her, you just have to walk away and place them on a different rocket chair. If she does break every rocket chair, if you have the added time, make sure to fix it. Magician is a very confusing survivor, and I do mean literally. He has a gimmick of making a decoy that will draw the attention to it instead of him. Whenever he pops a wand, a decoy will spawn, performing the exact same action he was doing, turning him invisible while getting a speed boost. This is a good time to call upon the expert vision of your phantoms and your puppets, as while you be unable to see the magician, your puppets can see him clear as day. If you do not have your puppets available, you can still watch for the blood trails. The best way to truly counter a magician is to predict where he is going, and to not fall for his mind games. Most magicians also tend to use his decoy as a temporary body block. If you are running into a small, thin corridor, be prepared that the magician will try to body block using his decoy, as you sadly do not walk through any decoys, as it is treated as a real survivor. You can try to slip past it by walking to the very edge of the hallway and try to slip by, but if not, you will be forced to hit it. So the true way to counter a magician is to watch where he is going, try to predict where the magician will be going, as it teaches you how to improve your own mind games and how to grab the focus of the people you want. Because just like a real magician, most of these games rely on sleight of hand. Explorer versus Hellember. Explorer versus Hellember is a very crazy matchup. Hellember has the ability to get his aura reading abilities from his phantom or his puppets. Explorer has the ability to travel into the micro world, preventing him from being tracked by certain powers. So what happens when a survivor whose main gimmick is to avoid tracking-based powers fights against a killer whose main purpose is to use tracking-based powers? Well then, you have one of the hardest survivors to find when you're playing a Hellember, and which means you will never be able to fully trust your puppets and your phantoms when an explorer is on the field. Explorer can also gain the ability to hide in small, tiny corners of the map using his micro world. This forces you to have to look at the ground or take the time to check multiple corners to make sure that he is not trying to deceive you. You will also be unable to trust the icons of your puppets or your phantom's movement. Explorer is the one, if not the only survivor who is able to walk past the puppets, save on the rocket chair, and tamper with the puppet before it even has the alert glow for you. So when you're fighting an explorer, in order to truly counter him, you need to make sure that you're looking at the ground, checking those corners, and making sure that when he is in his micro world, you catch him by surprise. Because Explorer teaches you how to check corners, look down, and to find survivors fully on your own. Mercenary, the rescuer. His goal is to wait for an opening, tank hits, and save. And your job is to shred his HP. So what happens when they enter the duel? Well, you get one of the hardest stalemates as old as time itself. Mercenary, on paper, seems like the counter to Hellenberg. He's able to tank the damage that Hellenberg can throw at him. He's able to dash away at the speed of light. But he does have one weakness in the Identity V community. He is considered to be the rescuer. And with that burden on his shoulders, he tends to be the only rescuer. If you can take the risk and bait another survivor to force him to go to rescue, or if you're a mad lad and chase him down first, you get rid of their only rescuer, forcing the backup rescuer or a survivor who may not even have time to go for the rescue. It's a strong gamble to fight against a mercenary, but if you play your cards right, you can use their own strength to your advantage. Another thing to counter a mercenary is to not just go for full on charging. His HP may be delayed, but so can your camp. Slowly chip away at his health to force him back into the normal HP state. It's a battle to see who budges first, and all you need to do is carefully nudge him to force him to make a move for you to take advantage of. Because to counter a mercenary, you need his team. Maybe as a bait, or maybe to make them think that he is invincible. Mercenary teaches you effective chair guarding. And a special pro tip, if there is a mercenary player that you know of, play a couple matches with them. Try out a couple of Hellenberg guarding techniques. Because if you get good at fighting against a mercenary, a lot of your games will get a lot easier. As sometimes, and I do mean sometimes, a lot of those randoms put way too much burden on the mercenary. Coordinator. Coordinator is a strange case in Identity V. While her ability is strong, it can only be used once, which is very strange because most of the Identity V crew has better uses for their ability. They can either have unlimited charges, have secondary uses, or it is a passive to them. This makes Cord a very weak rescuer, as while her rescue is pretty much guaranteed if she shoots the gun, if she misses, that's it. She needs to pretty much either work on cipher machines or open up a chest and hope and pray she gets a second gun. Now, how do you make Coordinator go to that point in the game where she's trying to wish she had a second shot at stunning you? Well, her gun auto-locks, and this allows you to exploit line of sight. By hiding behind a wall, tree, bush, her teammate on the rocket chair, statues, pretty much anything you can think of that makes this situation very funny. The flare gun will curve into you as it aims, and it will hit the wall or obstacle that you will laugh at. Now, in the scenario where you don't have anything to defend yourself with, and Coordinator has a very clear line of sight and nowhere for you to hide behind, well, this is where your buddy, the Phantom, comes in. The Phantom will act as your temporary shield to block the Coordinator's gun. Or this forces Coordinator to have to back off while you place them on the chair. Coordinator teaches you line of sight and clever blocking. And this is one of not the best matchups for your boy the Phantom, as her only ability is completely countered by him taking the shot instead of you. And even then, he does not get stunned. So this allows him to even be able to hit the Coordinator as she is shooting, if you somehow time it even better. Mechanic. Mechanic is almost the survivor equivalent to you. Mechanic herself is very weak, but that is not where her power comes from. Just as you are very weak, but that is also not where your power comes from. Her main ability is where her power truly lies. Just like you have your Phantom to aid in combat, kiting abilities, and added protection, Mechanic can do the same thing. Mechanic can summon her bot. Hello there, little bot. This bot can, in fact, turn the tide. But you might be asking, how? Well, it's because she can basically get a second survivor on the field for free. If you were to down her, the bot would just take her job for her. If you were to attack her, she can use the bot to body block for her, basically creating a temporary shield. I wonder where that strategy was used before. Oh well. And lastly, the bot can do a lot of very risky decisions if she needs to perform a very unlikely action that could result in someone dying or taking damage. She can send the bot, and if it happens to get down, no one is harmed. This essentially allows her to play around the bot while it does something crazy, and she's allowed to be the more strategic type. Wait, I swear I've heard this before. Oh well. So if you really truly want to deal with a mechanic, it is going to be an army versus an army, and whoever commands their units will win this battle. While you have your phantoms and your puppets to sweep the field, she has her bot to allow her to aid in her teammates by essentially turning this game from a 1v4 to a 1v5. And a lot of mechanics know this, so they will take good care of their bot the same that you take care of your puppets. This also teaches you not to fully camp the chair, because if you just stand at the rocket chair with the mechanic, you effectively didn't really do anything, because there's still 4 survivors on cipher machines tapping away. Forward. Forward is a very fast stunner. Forward has a football that he's able to use to charge at you to stun you, but he also has a secondary ability that he can use with his football as well, and that is using it for short bursts to get to loops or pallets. Knowing how much charge he uses when he does go for these stuns or when he goes for the short dashes will be perfect to improving your matchup against the forwards. But what is truly important to dealing with forwards is setups and predictions. A lot of forwards tend to just dash at you whenever they see that you're picking up a survivor. You can use your phantom to block it as a makeshift wall, as most of the time that's what you should be doing. But this also allows you to learn survivor patterns and abuse them very greatly. you can use this to bait the forward to go for a dash, and then his dash would be long enough that the phantom will activate, and you're allowed to down him alongside your phantom for an easy double kill. Now, if you truly want to deal with the forward, learn to block with your phantom and to know where he's going to dash, as most forwards can quickly turn on a dime, so if he sees it, he can try to curve around the phantom and use the phantom himself to be the wall that stuns you. But if you truly need to learn what forward teaches you, he teaches you setup and he teaches you prediction. Mind's Eye. Mind's Eye is a really fun survivor because she changes how most people will play the game. And the reason is, Mind's Eye is actually almost blind, both in lore and in game. In exchange for not being able to really see the screen, anytime an item, wall, or entity is in her line of sight, it will be highlighted for her. Now, how does this change kiting or dealing with a Mind's Eye? Well, this changes it a lot. Because she cannot physically see her opponents with her own eyes, she needs to rely on those highlights. And due to the fact that hunters are highlighted a very clear and contrasting color to any walls, pallets, and the floor, she essentially gets the ability to have wall hacks all throughout the match, which makes it so that it is nearly impossible to try to mind game her. In exchange for being able to practically bypass your ability and not being able to get mind gamed at all, she is very weak at vaulting and performing said actions. Mind's Eye is a perfect example of a shadow survivor as well, because her entire game plan is that she can decode really fast. She does not alert the hunter because she doesn't get a lot of calibrations, and she knows exactly where you are so she can hide out of your line of sight. But if you do manage to get her, she has to force you to either run around walls, or she has to try to bait you into setting up a bad positioning and reading you through the walls with her improved, or shall I say, weakened eyesight. If you really want to deal with a Mind's Eye, just be sure that whenever you do, in fact, try to go for a mind game, she is just going to see directly through it. And this is one of the first survivors who will teach you how to deal with aura reading abilities. So, if you do have any Mind's Eye friends, have them kite or have them fight you in 1v1s, or have them look at your positionings through the lens of Mind's Eye, as this will be very beneficial to dealing with the Mind's Eye matchup. Priestess. Priestess can teleport with her portals away from you controlling the map. This is also one of the more popular controller archetypes. Why do I say that she's a very popular controller archetype? Because she can pretty much cut the map directly in half with her global portals. It used to be to a point that she was able to just completely stall out a match, and it actually became legend in the Identity 5 community, also known as the never-ending match, to a point that there was even a spray that I will show on screen. This is also what I mean of controlling the map first can help control the entire match itself. Now, how do you make sure that Priestess doesn't get any control of the map? Well, it is with her portals. She has two types of portals. She has the small portals and the global portals. The global portals take a long time to set up, will be shown to you in a highlight with both entrances, and whenever a survivor runs through it, you're still allowed to hit their shadow self, and it will deal damage depending on how far away the end of the portal is. Then she has the smaller portals. You're able to go through the smaller portals, but you will be stunned, which is good for you because you gain fury whenever you get stunned. This also allows you to farm the smaller portals if you down her early. But the main thing with the smaller portals that you can also exploit is that she has to take a tiny startup animation that you can use to blink on her to completely bypass the portal. If you do need to spend a blink, make sure that it is worth it, that if you down her and wound her when she uses that portal, that you're able to place her on a rocket chair very quickly. As whenever she uses the portal and you knock her out of it, the portal will in fact not be made. So if you're able to beat her on the draw when you use the blink, or if she's too close and mistimes the distance and you swing on her and she gets hit, you force her in a very bad position where she either has to try to portal again, but you already dealt the damage, or she has to quickly move to a loop or pallet because she won't be able to use said portal. Now, if you really want to deal with a Priestess, it depends on what portal that she is using. If you do for the smaller portals, you can just go through them very quickly, get your stun, get your fury, or maybe even beat her to the punch herself. Or, if it's the global portal, and you're going to down a survivor who had Tide, because yes, Tide in fact actually works with the global portal, you can use your puppets to make up the distance, which is also the reason of why she is a controller, because she can use her global portals to basically teleport her entire team, which I will remind you, her invincible teammates, because of Tide Turner, to the other side of the map. Now, if you don't have your puppets, they effectively just got a free escape. But if you do have your puppets, you can quickly throw it and try to get there before the Priestess heals the survivor, or try to get there before they get themselves back up. Priestess teaches you about optimizing your movement speed, and Priestess also teaches you about, and is the first to teach you about knocking survivors out of their startup animations. Perfumer. Perfumer is a very annoying survivor if you don't understand fully how her ability works, and then it becomes just a slight annoyance when you do understand her ability fully. Perfumer has a multi-step process to her ability. She first sets down a starting perfuming spot. This is represented by a giant pink duplicate of the Perfumer. She then performs the actions that she needs or takes the necessary damage she has to in order to perform said actions. When she is done, she warps back to the spot by hitting the perfume again. Any damage she has received, she will then recover back to the perfumed spot. Now, to counter Perfumer is a little bit tricky. In order to counter Perfumer, you need to know the timing of your phantoms. The reason you need to know the timing of your phantoms is so that you can force her perfume to become a trap to deal damage to the Perfumer. Let me explain. So, here's how most situations of a Perfumer is going to work out, considering if you timed everything perfectly. You see the Perfumer start up her perfume and place down the warping location. You then place a reaction phantom right next to the Perfumer's spot where she will then warp back to. You then deal the damage to the Perfumer. In reaction to getting hit, she will then warp back. She will then warp back to the spot in front of the phantom. The phantom will then activate, dealing the damage to the Perfumer. Because she has already warped back, that wounded damage will now become permanent. Because she is now in the wounded state, she has to be forced to make sure her perfumes are a little bit more defensive. As, did you know, if the Perfumer is unable to interact with the item, she cannot use the perfume, which means landing a Terror Shock or a really good double hit before she's able to warp back will make it so that the Perfumer will stay down on the ground. Now, if she does know how to insta-perfume, as in she hits the perfume right before she gets hit, you then treat her a little bit differently. If you feel like she's going to pop a instant perfume, pretend to hit her. In order to do a fake hit, you go for the swing, but when the startup animation is happening, right before he actually goes down for the swing, you quickly flick your screen so that he will attack the other direction. If you make this attack very believable, she will pop the instant perfume, and then you can treat her as a normal Perfumer. One last thing as well is when she is in the wounded state, she will be forced to use it in a much more defensive way, and I'm going to fully explain this. There's a difference between aggressive and defensive perfumes. The reason aggressive and defensive are separated is because it depends on the actions she's going to take because of the perfume. If she places a perfume and you know that the added HP that she will regain will allow her to perform the necessary actions, or she's using it as a safety net to be more aggressive, that is, in turn, aggressive perfume. If she's using the perfume as a safety net so that she's able to quickly have a quick escape option, but she is still treating you as if she didn't pop the perfume, that is considered a defensive perfume. Knowing the difference between an aggressive and defensive perfume can allow you to help set up to counter the Perfumer. And lastly, a good example of a defensive and aggressive perfume is an aggressive one is on the rocket chair, where she can take a hit, warp back, and while you're in the recovery animation, she can try to sneak in a save. And a good defensive perfume is where she drops down the second story, forcing you to have to either waste time waiting out the perfume or go after her and risk losing her as she warps back. Perfumer personally teaches you a little bit of Phantom synergy, but doesn't fully teach you why it's good to be in perfect synergy with your Phantoms and your puppets. Cowboy. Cowboy is one of the few, if not the only, survivors who can save from a large distance. This forces you to completely change the way you defend the rocket chair compared to most of the survivors. Because Cowboy is able to save from a distance, this means you cannot just sit there, roam around the rocket chair, and wait for him to come to you. As Cowboy has the ability of his lasso, which allows him to quickly, as it says, lasso to certain obstacles, or in this case, lasso a survivor off the rocket chair. And Cowboy can lasso a great distance. This forces you to get as close to the rocket chair as you possibly can to block his lasso, forcing him to have to try to move around and possibly miss his lasso and going on to you, which puts his lasso on cooldown and then forces him to have to save normally. If you fail to do this, Cowboy can get a free lasso, save them off the rocket chair, and have incredible distance at the same time. While he's not on the rocket chair, he can still lasso from the great distance while the survivor is on the ground and you have to go and pick them up. And even in chase, he can use his lasso to gain a small burst of speed to the pallets or anything he needs to lasso to. The thing to counter Cowboy is his lasso. You need to make sure his lasso doesn't get any value the whole game. If he is trying to lasso somebody on the rocket chair, you try to stall it so that he's wasting way too much lasso and he's unable to get a clear shot on the survivor. Another thing is, when he is trying to go for a lasso, place the Phantom nearby him and make it chase the Cowboy. This forces it so if he does lasso the survivor off the balloon, he will be put in the animation where he's placing it over his shoulder. This can cause the Phantom to have just enough time to deal damage while he is unable to move. And a personal note that you need to keep track of as well, he is one of the few survivors that you also need to account for everyone's gender. I am not joking when I say this, it is very important. You need to know who is a male on the enemy team. Why do I say this? Well, because if Cowboy lassos a male survivor, and I really do mean keyword male, the damage will be split 50-50. If it's a female, all the damage will be sent to just the Cowboy. This simple phrase changes the interaction completely, as if Cowboy times his lasso incorrectly with a male survivor, he could unintentionally down half of his own team. And if it was with a female, only Cowboy would have gotten downed. If you truly want to counter a Cowboy, make sure that he is constantly aiming at you when he's trying to save off the rocket chair. If he's carrying a male, try to sneak an additional point of damage off of both of them. And make sure that when he tries to use a lasso, it becomes way too risky and he might take additional unnecessary damage if he tries to use the lasso. Female Dancer. Female Dancer has the ability to literally control the flow of battle by placing her music boxes. Female Dancer has two kinds of music boxes, and you can tell by the color they produce on the ground. If it is blue any action you perform will become slower, effectively making it so that any action you perform in a blue music box you are forced to commit to. Even the action of repositioning yourself will be a hard commitment. If the area is red, all survivors will be increased with those same actions. Dancer is the literal definition of a controller survivor. She can effectively place down areas to control the realm of the battlefield. She can make loops incredibly safe, and she can create dead zones with the blue or red music boxes, as she can place the red one to turn loops and pallets into very, very safe areas, or she can make you so slow that it will turn your rocket chair defense into a free escape. Now, how do you truly counter a female dancer? Well, that is where your puppets and your phantom come in, as they are not affected by the music box tones. Which means if you are in a blue area and you need to do something, you can send your phantom to charge into the battlefield first, have it do his actions, and then break the music box while it's applying pressure. This is also what I mean when I said that controller-based survivors is effectively playing a turf war, because if you do not break the music boxes, she will effectively control the entire map. She can turn the strongest areas even stronger and make your safe spaces personal nightmares. So if you want to truly counter a dancer, break her music boxes so that she's unable to change the flow of battle, and you can do this by sending in your puppets or your phantoms first. This also teaches you that with certain survivor actions or certain survivor interactions, you can send the phantoms or the puppets to do actions you normally would be punished for. Seer. Seer is a man who can turn all the survivors into tanky warriors. He doesn't even have to be anywhere near the chase, and he doesn't have to be anywhere near where he is sending his owls. He can effectively turn anyone into a 3 health survivor from the sidelines. This makes him a really good trickster archetype, or most cases, a really good support. Now, how do you counter a Seer? Well, it's with his owls. Not the owls themselves, it is how he gains the owls. Seer starts the game with 1 owl off and ready. It also takes a few seconds for the owl to go and fly around to all the survivors, which means you do have a window where he is unable to perform his blocks. But if not, once he pops his owl, he has to be looking at you, and he has to be close enough for him to recharge his owls, which means if Seer is nowhere near you, and you haven't looked at the Seer, and the Seer hasn't looked at you, you can rest assured that an owl won't pop out of thin air. One funny interaction with Hellember and Seer is that you can unintentionally do a trade offer. What do I mean by this? There has been multiple times where me and the Seer have signed a non-verbal agreement where I get my fury and Seer gets his owls. This has led to very long staring contests while the survivor on the rocket chair dies. So please make sure that when you do stare at a Seer, You are both charging your meters. You are charging your Fury, so you can gain your Phantom and your Puppets, and Seer is charging his Rage, so that he can get Owls, so he can make sure that none of his teammates die on the next hit. You can also try to predict when a Seer is going to drop an Owl, as once he drops the Owl, it will stay for a few seconds, and then it will disappear. Which means you can in fact wait out the Owl, and then hit the Survivor immediately afterwards. This can also allow you to bypass the Owl if you have extra time to spare. Embalmer. Embalmer can be a thorn in your side because of his main gimmick. Embalmer's main gimmick is that he is able to summon a coffin, and he is able to embalm his teammates. What does embalming do? Well, if a survivor is embalmed and they get downed, Embalmer can choose to revive them at the coffin. If not, they can also choose to revive them at the rocket chair. This effectively means that he can automatically save someone without even having to run to the rocket chair, forcing you to have to rechase someone without gaining any progress. While you do take a chair state, you do not have someone actively on the rocket chair, and you're not getting value from baits, swaps, or drawing the teammates to go for a rescue, effectively putting you back at the start of the match, where you're trying to chase the first survivor. One thing you can do is that when they are actually embalming, you can see the coffin. If you do have a puppet armed and ready, you can try to warp to the coffin before the animation ends. When the animation ends and you're able to attack them, they have a shield and they gain Tide for free. You can wait out the shield and attack them once it breaks, and then wait out the Tide. To truly counter an Embalmer player, you need to make sure you know whether or not it's good to go for the person who is embalmed. Because if he does in fact swap who is embalmed to a teammate, until they are embalmed, Embalmer cannot swap to a brand new person. Which means, if they embalm someone and you trade who you're chasing with, you can effectively chair someone and leaving Embalmer's ability kind of useless. So if you really want to counter an Embalmer player, be ready to have your down be turned into an automatic free escape, and make sure to watch the HP or the survivor icons to make sure who is embalmed. Once you find out who is embalmed, you can plan on who you're going to down next. Do you want to risk going for the person who is embalmed while getting a free chair state? They are going to be automatically rezzed. Or do you want to go for someone who isn't embalmed and try to bait out the rescuer with the person who is on the rocket chair, at the cost of having to trade who you are chasing? Prospector. Prospector can toss around the hunter with ease, and this is because of his main gimmick being the magnets. Prospector has a polarity attached to him at all times that he can abuse with his magnets. Prospector can throw a positive or negative charged magnet, and depending on the polarities of the magnets attached to two different people, can push or pull them into better or worse situations. The thing with Prospector is that he can toss a magnet onto the hunter, and then slam them into a wall for a stun. But it does take a small startup before the magnets actually trigger, which allows you to try to beat him on the draw. If you want to counter a Prospector, you can do the following things. Whenever he places a magnet and you have a blink and you think it's worth it to go for it, you can blink on the Prospector. His magnet will push you or pull you. Your attack recovery will be cancelled, and then you can continue as if nothing happened. You can also magnet surf. What is magnet surfing? Well, if you position yourself in a good area and he performs his magnet on you, you can then be sent flying in a direction that you want to go. This one is a little bit harder to pull off against Prospectors, but if you can in the heat of battle, it can save you, as you can purposely let yourself walk a bit further from the rocket chair with a Prospector, hit him, have his magnets push you back to the rocket chair, and then because of the blink, it will reset your recovery animation, and then you are in the perfect position to guard the rocket chair, and Prospector took a hit. And another thing about Prospector's magnet is that the stun works if you land on a wall. If you get pulled to the Prospector and you don't hit anything, none of you will be stunned. So if you want to truly counter a Prospector, know the magnets and know the range. If you want to know the ranges of the Prospector's magnets, you can tell because the polarities will get stronger. It's a lot easier to tell between the different colored magnets as they will clash with each other, so it'll be a clear distinction, but you will see a trail going to both magnets the closer you get. And there will be a short little bar at the bottom of your screen when the polarities are strong enough to push or pull. Enchantress. Enchantress is very simple, but very effective. Enchantress has the ability to stun, and that is it. And she stuns well. It's not because of how she stuns, but it is the way her stuns interact with you and your abilities. Enchantress has a skull that she can gain stuns with. If she is nearby you, she will gain stuns. If she gets hit, she can get stuns. And if a survivor she was helping gets hit after she has interacted with them, they will also get stuns. With this, she is able to pop the skull, and then it will be sent to you. If she is in range, she can be able to stun you, regardless of line of sight. This effectively makes her an AoE stun. Not an AoE stun-er, an AoE stun. The best way to deal with an Enchantress is either A, beat her on the draw so that when her stun pops off, you're already in the recovery animation, and so when the stun officially pops off, the short cooldown of the stun will outpace the recovery animation, effectively nullifying your recovery. Or you completely ignore her. If you want to truly counter an Enchantress, keep an eye on her, as you cannot block with your Phantom and you cannot block with your Puppet. If you do really need to keep the Enchantress away from you, send the Phantom to do the attacking, as because her targeting is strictly tied to Hellember themselves, the Phantom cannot be interacted with at all, essentially making it so that the Hellember's Phantom can just walk up to her and start pressuring her. There is a weird thing with Enchantress as well, that if you keep going and attacking her, she can pop the stuns too late, and you can effectively get chains off of her stun, and she can effectively help you. But that is assuming the Enchantress is either way too trigger happy or she's late to pop the stuns, because she has two versions of her stun. She can pop a single stun, which will temporarily give you a headache and make you stop for not even a second. And then she has the 3 stun, which is about the same amount of time as a normal flare gun. Most of the time, Enchantresses will use the single stun if you get close, because as you are only a basic hitting hunter, if she has a stun, she effectively has a way to stop your next swing. So you do need to keep beating her on the draw if she has a stun, or use your puppets or your phantom to try to outrange her and make it so that they deal the damage to her while you are outside of her stunning range. Wildling. Wildling has his boar, and this boar can really mess you up. Wildling's boar has 2 states. He has the follow state and he has the riding state. When the boar is in the follow state, he can disrupt your abilities by screaming. When he screams, this makes it so that Tinnitus will never proc. This makes it so that if you're searching around for survivors, you cannot look at the status bar to tell if there's a survivor nearby. You have to physically look for them and find them yourself. Then there is the riding state. When Murrow goes into the riding state, he hops on top of the boar. The boar essentially acts as a second survivor, taking the damage for him. Whenever he takes enough damage, Murrow will be sent back to the normal state, and the boar will be sent back into the following state. But the thing with riding state is that Murrow gets a speed boost by riding on top of the boar. Murrow can also have the boar charge to help free people from the balloon state. Not the actual carrying state, but when you are in the action of ballooning them and picking them up, if he charges, they will break free and you will be sent into the wall. But if they are in the ballooning state, this can help buy time for them to struggle. If you truly want to counter a wildling, you need to know when his boar is on or off cooldown. You need to be able to deal with his boar, and when he goes to rescue on a rocket chair, you just need to wait out when he hops off the boar. As luckily, when he's in the riding state, he cannot rescue someone from the rocket chair. This can allow you to make a bait with the survivor on the rocket chair and try to trade for Murrow. So, if you want to truly counter him, just focus on the boar and try to bait him with another one of his teammates. Acrobat. Acrobat is a very control-oriented survivor, as he has 2 different ways to control the battlefield. One of them is with the nitro, fire, and sticky bombs, and the other is with his flips. Let me truly explain. So let's start off with the first portion of his ability, which is the actual bombs themselves. Acrobat has 3 separate bombs. It is the fire, the nitro, and the sticky bomb. Each of these have a unique effect depending on if you step in it. If you were to step in each of the bombs, you will get a exclusive debuff. If you step in the fire, you will lose access to all of your abilities. If you step in the nitro, your interactions will be slowed. And if you step in the sticky, your movement speed will be reduced. Whenever Acrobat is going to throw a bomb, he does a unique stance. When you see that unique stance, that is how you can tell that he is aiming a bomb. And when he suddenly gets a burst of movement, that is when he's going to throw the bomb. Now it's on to the second portion of his ability, and that is the actual movement part of his ability. Because sometimes Acrobats will try to use his ability for the bomb portion, and some will like to use it for the actual movement portion of his ability. When Acrobat uses his ability, he jumps forward to throw the bomb on the ground, then doing a tuck and roll. This tuck and roll can allow him to jump over obstacles, effectively creating brand new loops exclusive to him. This can also force you to have to play around both the bomb and his ability to suddenly gain a brand new kiting route. If you truly want to counter an Acrobat, learning how to minimize the effects that you will receive from the bombs by optimizing your movement to play around each and every one of them, and knowing when he will throw the bombs so that you can predict where he's going to tuck and roll to try to sneak in an additional hit, or to regain the ground and bypass the bomb altogether. He is honestly a really great control character in the middle of kites, because if he throws the bomb in a spot that you do have to be forced to interact with, he can slow your abilities, he can slow you down, make it so that your interactions are a lot slower, or he can make it so that you cannot call upon your puppets or your phantoms. And with the same with a lot of the movement abilities is that he can jump down from the second to the first floor and effectively cut off parts of the map that you have to spend time trying to run back to him. So always make sure to watch which bomb is which, where he is throwing it, and where he is going to land. First Officer. First Officer has a pocket watch that he can use to hypnotize you. If you are in fact hypnotized, he will make a decoy that interacts a few seconds behind him, while his real self is invisible. So, how do you truly counteract this pocket watch? Well, it's with outranging the First Officer. When the First Officer pops his initial pocket watch, it will have a radius. If you're in that radius, which is most likely when he pops it, you will be hypnotized. Then he will attempt to go for a reshake. During those moments of reshakes, you can try to step out of his circle, which is indicated by a glowing white circle around the First Officer whenever he shakes and reshakes his watch. If you are outside of the circle, the effect will not land, and you will be able to see him clear as day without any of the hypnotism effects. But do be warned, he can always reapply the hypnotism with a reshake if you get too close. But this also consumes one of his reshakes, as he can only reshake it 2 times for a maximum of 3 total pocket watch pops. Another thing that you do need to worry about with First Officer is that whenever he pops a pocket watch, if you were to hit him out of that effect, he will gain a 5-second tide. And this includes any time he pops the pocket watch. This does not include reshakes. So if he is near the rocket chair and he pops a pocket watch, you need to be ready to stall for those additional 5 seconds. Now, I know what you might be asking. Toylawyer, how do I know where the real first officer is instead of attacking where the decoy is? Well, that is where your puppets and your phantom come into play again. With survivors whose main ability is to mess with your vision, using the puppets or the phantom to help track the first officer or any other survivor that will interact with your vision or your camera will be essential, as while it affects you, it does not affect the phantom or the puppets. This allows them to charge into the survivor when needed, and also allows a much better way to track the survivor rather than having to guess where the blood trail is going, as the puppets and the phantom will glow brightly no matter the distance. They will also keep chasing until the first officer or the survivor that has performed said ability will run out. And if you can predict where they're going to go as well, you can even have the phantom or the puppet hit them out of the pocket watch. If you hit him out of the pocket watch, this will also trigger the 5-second effect if it was a first officer, allowing you to start his timer a lot further than he should have procced. So if you really want to fight a first officer, you need to keep an eye on the range of his pocket watch. You need to make sure when he is going to reshake, and you also need to make sure that you can stall if he does in fact use those 5 seconds efficiently, or be ready to go for a swing when you hit them off of the rocket chair. Barmaid. Barmaid has a special ability that she can give drinks to her allies to aid them in combat by healing them over a period of time. Now, there is a special gimmick to this ability. While this might seem a little bit understandable on paper, this drastically can affect the outcome of a game if you can keep this in mind. But first, let me explain what the ability truly is. Barmaid can hand the drinks to her teammates or herself so it can slowly heal. The key part of this ability is that it will slowly heal them. This means that when she gives them the alcohol, they will not instantly heal themselves up. You can tell by looking at their HP bar, and that it will slowly decrease over time. By looking at the outline of the survivor's HP bar, you can know exactly how much time you have to land a killing blow before they gain that additional stack of HP. This also means that you can actually down someone before they actually get that healing off, and this could be a game-changing strat if you can risk using a blink or you cut them off fast enough. Whenever Barmaid also mixes a wine, she also gets this effect as well, but in reverse, spending 1 bar of her HP in order to gain the drink. She then recovers that HP after a bit. But this also means if she drinks at a wrong time, or she mixes at a wrong time, she can literally have that effect be nullified. And if she mixes a drink, you can actually kill her without having to put her in the wounded state, as she puts herself in the wounded state free. The second portion of this ability that you need to know about is the movement speed buff. Not for the actual drinking portion, but she has a separate drink that only she can use that allows her to get a short speed buff. She performs the same action as the normal drinking effect, so you will know when she gets that speed boost. Not only will she get the actual speed boost itself, but she will also take a drink, meaning you know exactly which version of the wine she happened to drink. But also keep in note that those drinks count as separate bottles and entities, meaning she can give the bottles of healing while also keeping a personal bonus speed up drink for herself. And the last thing you should know about is that Demi Bourbon is a upstanding citizen when it comes to drinking. She will not allow anyone under the legal drinking age to have any wine. Which means if you have an entire team that you are facing filled with cheerleaders, coordinators, and memories, rest assured that Barmaid won't be giving anyone a sudden boost of health. And I really do mean she takes it very seriously. Coordinator is still mad to this day. But now, how to truly counter a Barmaid? The best way to truly counter a Barmaid is to attack her or attack her teammates before the healing actually procs. Due to the fact that it's a delayed healing, you can have the chance to nullify its effect if you hit it faster than it can pop. For her speed boost, just treat it like any other speed boost and have a puppet ready or be on alert to make up the distance that she is trying to transition with. Now, I will have you know that something very exclusive to Barmaid is this does not work in 2v8. You can nullify the effect of the legal drinking age because apparently they changed it so that it is technically fruit juice or fruit punch. So the previous effect of having the legal drinking age will be nullified, meaning that even memory can toss a bottle at your face. And yes, that is very concerning to me as well. Postman. Postman is a very fun survivor if he is on the field solely because of his letters. Now, you might be asking, what is Postman's letters? Postman's letters is the fact that whenever he uses his ability, he can choose one of 3 buffs to give to a teammate or immediately use on himself. These range from giving them a speed boost, having them rescue faster, giving them a whole secondary ability similar to broken windows, or allow them to perform their actions at a faster rate. Having a postman on the field allows survivors to get benefits out of the blue and become either stronger in what they already excel at, or postman can help slowly nullify the weaknesses of the survivor. A good example would be if there is a decoder player who needs to pick up the slack from the aggression that you are taking, he can give them increased decoding. Or if someone needs to kite better, he can give them the buff of secondary broken windows. If a rescuer needs to save from you, he can give them the buff for them to rescue faster. And in the end game, he can give them the ability to open exit gate and see hatch permanently. His buffs have different reactions and it has different values for their time. Some of them is just a small one-time use. Some of them they will keep until they gain a new buff. Some of them will stay until they activate it, and some will be only the set amount of time, as I mentioned previously. If you want to know which survivor has what buff, you can check in their health bar. Postman and the survivor will get the exact same buff. You can check it by matching the corresponding icon to the buff that Postman would normally get, which will be shown on the screen. If you want to counter a Postman, you need to be able to know what kind of buffs Postman can give to his team, and when he has used a buff, and when he's unable to send another buff. The reason that he's able to give the buffs is from the dog named Wick. Wick is the small backbone that carries the team. Postman can give Wick the letter to give them the buffs, but that also makes it so that the further they are away, the more Wick has to run to give them the buffs. So, if you're quick enough, you can down them before Postman can get the buff onto them, and thus preventing Postman and the survivor from getting the buff. This does not work when Postman uses the buff himself by peeking at the letters. If he peeks at a letter, only he will get the buff. Does not need to send Wick the letter, but at the same time his cooldown will be slightly larger. So knowing whether or not he gave the buff to himself or to his teammates will help you understand the amount of downtime you have for the team receiving an extra buff. He can also stun you by sending the dog to your location, similarly to how Batter and all the other stunners work. And if the dog happens to grab your leg, it will count as a stun. So if you see Postman nearby, you need to make sure he does not have the ability to toss and go and stun you. So for a recap on how to counter Postman, always make sure you know if Postman's able to use the buffs, what kind of buffs will be useful during that point in time, and whether or not he will use it, as he gets 3 buffs to choose from, but it is all random. And finally, please make sure you understand where he is on the map to make sure you don't get stunned. Gravekeeper. Gravekeeper is a rescuer that will probably give you a little bit of trouble if you do not play around his main gimmick, or if he's able to utilize his gimmick a lot better than you can disable it, it will also give you a hard time. What Gravekeeper's main ability is that he has a shovel that he can use to dig underground. By digging underground, this allows him to take 1 hit of damage from you and allows him to perform multiple different actions to eat the time away from you. One of the things that he can do is that he can dig completely underground. If he is on a higher level of elevation and there is a floor beneath him, such as double-story buildings, or more importantly, the basement, one of your most precious areas to guard and one of the best areas to complete these curb stomp teams with your impressive camping, he is able to bypass the stairs and fall directly into the middle of the basement to rescue them, technically allowing him to have 2 methods to enter the basement. He can also use the shovel to hide under dropped pallets. Now, while you might be thinking, how important does hiding under an already dropped pallet mean? But this also makes it so that you can completely run under or even stop underneath a dropped pallet, forcing you to have to break it while he can move freely. This also breaks the AI of the Phantom, as it will either hit him, either attempt to try to hit him, or it will forcibly break the pallet, which allows him to have a bunch more breathing room. If you really want to counter a Gravekeeper when he goes to rescue, like most rescuers, well, every rescuer that has to put themselves in a defensive state, wait for them to drop their guard, as most of the time, they cannot save while they are in that defensive state. And thank the devs for not allowing that. So if you see a Gravekeeper using his shovel to make it to the rocket chair, You can use that time, if you can spend that extra time of just gaining fury. When he pops out of the digging state, that is when you can actually start using your camping abilities to try to stall him to death. So, a recap on how to counter Gravekeeper. Watch his shovels. Place your puppet near the rocket chair in basement and not nearby the door, because he does have a second way to enter the basement, and when he goes to go for a rescue, wait out his digging state before popping a phantom. If you can try to sneak him out of the digging state, make sure you do that at a very far distance where you can swap back before he can make it to the rocket chair. Prisoner. Prisoner is a decoder that allows him to connect the cipher machines to help aid slower decoders or help cover up when someone has to leave. As I mentioned previously, Luca has the ability to make connections. And with these connections, he's allowed to give up to 75% of his decoding progress to that secondary cipher. This allows him to technically decode 2 cipher machines at the same time. You might be thinking of how important it is for a survivor to split his decoding process alongside 2 cipher machines instead of just keeping it all to himself. Well, the thing is, this allows him to speed run into the mid game, which is the most important part when it comes to fighting Hellember. If it is in the mid game and you have not really gotten anybody on the rocket chair and setting up bait for the rescuers, they can single-handedly nullify that weakness of having to split the cipher machines, as he can make it so that he can give the percentage of decoding to someone who doesn't really need to be decoding. Which means if you take someone off of the cipher machine, but it is at like 95%, Luca can then connect it, and congratulations, you basically did not take anyone off the cipher machine, as they can still pop it, the cipher machine, while he is decoding, as if nothing happened. This also increases Luca's decoding speed whenever there's a connection being active. So you have a survivor that is basically able to cover for when you have to take someone off of a cipher machine, or can help aid someone and silently work on a cipher machine across the map. So how do you really deal with that? Well, you either take him out first, or you break his connections. When you are next to a cipher machine with a Luca on the field, you have the ability to break the connection. Regardless of whether or not Luca has made a connection to the cipher machine, you can break it, and this will force Luca to not be able to connect to that cipher machine for a set amount of time. This can be really good during the early, mid, or even late game to prevent Luca from sweeping the floor with his connections. If a cipher machine is really close to prime, you can break the connection to make sure that Luca doesn't sneak the prime by connecting it to another cipher machine. Another thing that you need to make sure about Luca is that he has the ability to perform a stun. He has actually 2 methods to perform stuns on you. He has the stun that he can use by himself, and whenever he is actively working on a cipher machine that is connected, it will summon a electric field. I am terribly sorry. Under this electric field, you will be stunned after a set amount of time. But in exchange, after the 3rd stun, this effect will no longer happen. Most of the Hellember main should have already had their ears perked up whenever I said the word stun. And yes, that does mean you can in fact farm that stun. If you purposely let yourself get stunned 3 times, you gain yourself 1.5 stack of fury. Do keep in mind that after the previous nerfs to the non-pallet stun fury gain rate, it will be lowered, but you do get 3 stuns worth of fury gain. After that, you are free to break the prisoner's connections as if nothing happened. The thing to deal with a prisoner on the field is to watch the cipher machine's progress bar, and if you see it growing with no survivor around, this definitely means that a prisoner has connected to the cipher machine and you should break it. But also keep in mind that at any point during the match, any cipher machine can be connected to Luca's cipher and it will slowly gain 45% of his decoding progress. So when you take someone off of a cipher machine, Luca will then take over both cipher machines at the same time, effectively. At a slower rate, he can effectively cover up that cipher machine that the rescuer had to get off of. And he can still pop cipher machines with the connection that he made. So if you really want to know how to counter a prisoner, the recap is watch for connections, make sure that the cipher machines that you need in the end game have been broken from the connections. Make sure to farm Luca's stuns if you do have the downtime, and keep an eye on the final prime. Painter has a very slightly confusing ability on how it works, and depending on how you know how this conditions of the stun actually work, this can make Painter a really annoying survivor, or it could just be a slight annoyance that you just have to occasionally deal with. And it also depends on your experience and the painter's experience as well. So, Painter's main gimmick is that he has the ability to create paintings. And these paintings are so mesmerizing that it will draw you to them and it will stun you. His paintings are a little bit wonky and sometimes a little bit confusing on how they really work, especially if you get to like the final frames, as I have had some weird interactions with the paintings because I have attacked at weird intervals and it completely just made it really confusing. But most of the time you don't really have to deal with it, but also be sure that his paintings doesn't affect your gameplay that badly. But what truly is the paintings and how to counter them? Well, paintings have 2 conditions that they both need to be met, and if even one of these conditions is not being met, it will not stun you. And what are these conditions? It has to be in range, and it has to be on your screen. Now, if you are at too far of a range, you are free to look at the painting, and the best way to tell is that it will have a circle around the photo or the painting that will allow you to determine how far is its range. Depending on whether or not the skin or the accessory will help you be able to tell it further or harder away, either further away or make it harder to see compared to some of the other skins, but there always is a circle. Now, if you are within that circle, it does not matter how close you get to the painting as long as it is not on your screen. So the best way to counter a painting when it's very close to you is to quickly flip your screen away from it and curve your hunter around the painting, making sure it does not enter your screen. You can be directly next to the painting, but if you have good camera angles and you have good positioning, you can make it so that the painting was not even there to begin with. Now, the thing with Painter as well is that he also needs to have a little bit of setup to make his paintings. He does not immediately have the ability to place down a painting. He needs to look at you and kite for a bit so he can draw your face. And this is crucial. You do have a little bit of breathing room to get him wounded before he's able to actually make the painting and place it down. But when he does have the painting, he's able to almost instantly drop it, and if it's in your screen, it will basically be an instant stun. Now, how to fully deal with a painter is very easy. You just need to make sure that his paintings are not having their conditions met, and when you're trying to deal with the area control of the painting, you can send your phantom or your puppets in to aid you while you're going the alternate path. Batter can be a very annoying survivor if he plays his cards right, and can be almost invincible if you have poor positioning. Batter's main gimmick is that he can use his cricket bat to swing a cricket ball to push you backwards. He can also enter an enraged state to turn those simple pushbacks into stuns, but at the cost of breaking the cricket bat's ball. Now, time for the actual stunning part and pushback itself. When Batter wants to perform that action, he has to charge up his cricket bat. This can be told by him going into a wind-up position. While he can still move around perfectly, you can tell whether he is in the wind-up position by his cricket bat. It will be very obvious if he is in the wind-up position. Just like a lot of aiming survivors, his face will determine where he is going to shoot the cricket ball. The cricket ball will shoot in a direct straight line with no variation whatsoever. This should be staying true, but if he does have the ability to curve the cricket ball at some point, start panicking. But until then, it will only shoot in a straight line where he is aiming. Now, when he does shoot it, if he is in the unenraged state, it will push you backwards. When you do get hit, the cricket ball will fall to the ground. This allows Batter to have an infinite source of ammo unless you purposely break the cricket ball yourself. Batter also has the ability to go into an enraged state. During this, his cricket strikes will transform from simple pushbacks into full-on stuns. While both can be used to save survivors from balloon, the cricket ball under the enraged effect can slam you into a wall to stun you. But be warned that the enraged state is in fact stronger than the normal state. The cricket ball will go at a much better rate and for a further distance. Better to explain it is that Batter will get a power boost when he is in the enraged state. So how do we deal with a Batter? Well, that's where your phantom and your puppets come in. Due to the nature of his ability, the puppets and the phantoms are really good at dealing with him. If he is in the wind-up state, he cannot interact with the puppets, or if you're going to go for a balloon, you can place the phantom directly in front of you and they will technically act as a spawnable wall, forcing the Batter to have to go into a very risky position before he can shoot, which may buy enough time for the balloon to not work. So here is a full recap as a double check for batter. In order to counter a batter fully, you need to make sure that you know whether or not he's in the enraged state, you know exactly what direction he is going to face to shoot the cricket ball, you need to count how many cricket balls he has at any given time, which he has I think a maximum of 3. Don't quote me on that last part. You need to know whether or not he's in the enraged state. And finally, you need to make sure that he does not have line of sight whenever he needs to rescue someone from a ballooned state. And that last part is very important. When someone is down on the ground, batter will try to attempt to apply pressure, but you can summon the Phantom as a makeshift wall to force him to try to either walk around, or he will try to attack through the Phantom, and it will allow you to balloon and place the survivor on a rocket chair. Toy Merchant. Toy Merchant has the ability to fly through the sky and have a toy box to aid her teammates. Now let's start with the catapult and glider portion of her abilities. The glider and the catapult will be the most important thing to counter, as her toy box may not even be an issue depending on the team comp. So, how do we counter the glider and the catapult? Well, the catapult can be placed on the ground to allow the toy merchant or her teammates to launch through the air, allowing them to go to different transitions or better loops, or just get out of risky spots safer. The toy merchant has a unique ability, and that is the glider. When she jumps from a high area, instead of falling down like most survivors will do, she will pop open the glider, allowing her to slowly descend while still gaining the ability to move. This allows her to fly to different loops, or allows her to make her own form of transitions using the glider. This also makes it so that you cannot really bait a merchant into falling down like you can with most of the other survivors. A prime example is forcing them to jump over the railing on multiple stops on the Hullabaloo Circus map. I will put the name in the video. While most survivors will have to vault that portion, only to fall into one of your swings or deal with the Phantom, the toy merchant can pop her glider and fly directly over you, and just having to bypass the Phantom altogether. This can be combined with the glider to essentially have her, this can essentially be comboed with the catapult and the glider to have her have incredible transition abilities. Now, the key with the glider and the key with the catapults is that they are on timers. When Toy Merchant uses her glider, she will be put on a slight cooldown, allowing her to fall normally like other survivors will. And when Toy Merchant uses a catapult, or her teammates uses a catapult, it will also be put on a cooldown. The catapult is very, very easy, and sometimes, if you can read the minds of the survivors, you can actually use that to an advantage. Catapults have a short startup animation before they actually get set flying, which means if you can time your blink or your basic attack with the catapult, you can actually turn that into your own trap. If you land it good enough, you can make it so that they don't get the catapult launch, they take additional damage, and if you're even better at timing it, you can get it so that they're even put on cooldown. All of this from one simple play. And now, for the second part of her kit, This portion of her kit most of the time will never be used due to the power creep of Identity B, as most survivors no longer have items anymore, which is very sad because most of the this feels more like this is made for most of the Season 1, Season 2, Season 3, Season 4 kind of survivors. And what I mean by the Season 1, Season 2, Season 3, and Season 4 were more of like lawyer, gardener, thief, mechanic, forward, first officer, characters who our main abilities are very short, their main abilities get used by very quickly, and they're able to get items from the chest very easily. Characters such as Seer, Seer, Enchantress, Priestess, Psychologist, Cheerleader, and etc. And other characters who have main abilities and or passives cannot gain anything from this secondary ability. And what is that secondary ability? That is the Toy Box. Toy Box allows Toy Merchant to gain items and get items from the chest faster. She can then use those items to put it into a little toy box. She can then throw those items to survivors in the middle of kites or in very difficult situations to give them their items. If you are on a team with a Priestess, a Seer, and an Enchantress, you do not have to worry about the toy box mechanic, as Priestess, Seer, and Enchantress all have passives, which means they will no longer need a second item. And since none of the survivors ever needs to take an item, Merchant, not being able to use her own items from the toolbox, can't really do anything. Maybe she can use it in the late game, but she won't really get any value from the toy box. But you do need to know which survivors on the team will benefit or not benefit from the toy box. This takes a little bit of experience, and with more survivors slowly getting passives or slowly getting pure abilities that just get put on a cooldown and do not have any usage rates, the toy box mechanic may just become fully obsolete. But still keep that in mind. So how do we counter a toy merchant? Well, to counter a toy merchant fully, we need to know when her catapults are going to be used, where the catapults are going to be going, look at her glider in the air, which is followed by a bright yellow arrow on your screen, and where she is going to be going, whether or not both the glider and the catapult are even on cooldown, and finally, the team composition if they're able to use the toy box secondary ability. And if they can use the secondary ability, how would adding an additional item to that survivor at any given moment will change the flow of battle? As this allows her to give basically a mercenary suddenly a flare gun, or giving them suddenly really strong items. Psychologist and patient. This might seem really weird, but I'm actually going to pair them up as a duo and not as single units, like single survivors, due to the fact that they actually get stronger or weaker depending on if they are both on the field or if they are both individual characters. Psychologist and patient are a duo. They will always be a duo. In their lore, in game, and just in general. let's start with the psychologist portion first, then we're going to go to the patient portion, and then we're going to go to the duo portion. Psychologist herself has the ability to use a whistle to give her HP to a teammate. She also has the ability of having an additional HP at the start of the match. If you were to hit the psychologist, her stress will start to go down, she will calm herself down, and then that stress will then become her HP. This essentially makes it so that it will take 3 hits the first time you deal with a psychologist, but after that, she goes down to the normal 2 hits, or aka a normal health pool. When she does use the whistle, she will take 1 health state of her own HP and give it to the survivor that she is giving it to. Another key note is that you can actually give HP if it will kill you. So if a psychologist suddenly goes down and your puppets are nowhere near them, just know that she willingly gave her last ounce of HP to a teammate. And now we're going on to the patient solo portion of this section, and that is the grappling hooks. Patient has the ability to use grappling hooks, and they act very simple. You can point it at a wall or a ceiling, and he will shoot the grappling hook to that location. If it is a ceiling, he will climb over it, basically bypassing it and creating brand new looping strategies. If it is a wall, he will bounce off of it, gaining a massive speed boost as he falls to the ground, very gracefully. Patient is a very, very strong transition kiter, and he will be used to basically use the grappling hooks to fly out of your range or create very complex looping patterns that will make you scratch your head. But the strongest portion is when they are actually both on the same team. That simple psychologist that was able to gain an extra health state and give the ability to give her HP to her teammates now gains a dash. Patient can also dash to the psychologist with their trait of bonded. Their trait of bonded allows it so that when they are nearby each other, one of them can press the bonded action to dash to the other person. A psychologist can dash to the patient, and the patient can dash to the psychologist. This can be game-changing if you did not know that, as this can turn psychologist from a simple survivor who has the just basically one additional health state and the ability to transfer into a great transition kiter. And this makes patient able to have a second use of transition kiting. This greatly improves both of their kiting potential versus a Hell Ember, and you need to be prepared if they are both on the field. But what really is the supernatural boost is actually from patient himself. You might be wondering, why does patient get the huge power spike and not psychologist, who gains a dash to her kit? Well, that's because if patient is going to rescue a psychologist from the chair, he gets a massive 50% increase of rescuing speed if the person is Ada. This can be crazy if you don't expect this. This turns patient from a simple transition kiter into a person who has both the transition kiting in 2 different sources and the ability to become an amazing rescuer if you take out psychologist. While separated, they're very simple of a healer and a transition kiter. But when they are together, psychologist becomes a rescuee, and patient becomes a really good rescuer. deal with a Psychologist who has the additional health state and the ability to heal from far away, and then you now have to deal with Patient, who has incredible rescue speed and incredible movement speed. So if you have to deal with one of them, you can just treat them as the basic survivors that they are. If you can deal with an additional health state, you will be fine, and if you can deal with the transition kiting, you will be fine for Patient. But when they're both together, they become almost entirely new characters, as you now have to deal with a healing transition kiter, and you can also deal with a transition kiter who effectively becomes a very fast rescuer. Novelist. Novelist has the ability to swap places with you with his book. And you might be thinking, that is going to be very annoying. And well, yes, that is kind of true. Novelist has a long ability when he is in a 1v1 fight against you, and when he's trying to assist his teammate, his range would be slightly shorter. So how do you really truly counter a Novelist? Well, to counter a Novelist, you need really good positioning. But I might be getting some questions from you, and one of them might be, if he can swap positions with me, why is your way to counter him great positioning? And well, let me explain. He has to swap sometimes, and whenever he does swap, he has to look at you to recharge it. But your phantoms and your puppets, due to the nature of his ability only affecting Hellhammer himself, can allow you to set up some risky baits. But what I really mean by positioning is keeping an eye on yourself, and more importantly, keeping an eye on Novelist as well. The reason I'm saying to keep an eye on both of you is because you need to be able to prepare yourself in case you get swapped. If Novelist is in a good position, and you are also in a good position, nothing will happen. If Novelist is in a bad position, and you are in a bad position, nothing will happen. But the key thing is when someone has a good position, but the other one doesn't. If Novelist is out of position, but you are standing nearby the rocket chair, almost taking the battle for a clean sweep, all he needs to do is just tap that ability button, and suddenly you are now out of position. If he has good positioning, and you are out of positioning, he can then use his book as a way to have you play around him. You always need to know at any point, will you be able to still take him down if he were to randomly pop the swap on you? If the answer is yes, then keep staying in that position. If it is no, find a way that if you do get swapped, you can still have a way to counter him. This may be due to Phantom standing nearby him, so he's applying more pressure. It could be puppets right when he's going to swap, so that he basically has to stall himself with the puppet. Or you, whenever you swap, you either are such a close distance from each other or in a really bad area that you guys will just be back at square one. Trying to minimize your positioning errors while at the same time not giving Novelist such an amazing opportunity to take your spot from you is something you need to learn when you play Hellhammer. A lot of other hunters have better abilities to either lock him in place or make swapping with you a very risky decision, but against a Hellhammer, your only attack is really just either sub in or just hit him with a basic attack. So it is very crucial that you can still be able to down him no matter if he swaps to you or if you're forced to play around his book. Memory. Memory is a strange survivor, and it can be overwhelmingly confusing at the start, but once you understand her abilities, it becomes very easy to counter her. Her main ability is the pages, and the pages act as pushback. She will place a page where she is standing, and it would push everyone away from that space. This can be used to push you back or push her forward. She also has the ability to sync with another survivor. When she does this, she will turn into a tiny little doll, and this tiny little doll will fly around the survivor. She's still able to perform the previous action of the pages while on top of the survivor. She will also give the survivors buffs while she is synced with them. And the final thing is she can teleport to any of the survivors if she is outside of your terror radius. This makes her really good at pressuring cipher machines or aiding her teammates. She will get a lot of her value when she isn't actually being chased or synced with someone who is in chase as often, because when she syncs, you effectively take out half the team's decoding progress, but when she warps to a survivor, she can nullify the amount of time it takes to go from cipher to cipher. This also can make it so that she can just move very quickly around the map, making it hard for you to go and catch her. Weeping Clown. Weeping Clown is a transitional beast with his rockets. He will outrun you, and he has multiple ways to mess you up. He may have one ability, but he can utilize that single ability in multiple different ways to give you a run for your money. The first one is, as it's most likely assumed, he can use his rockets to give himself additional movement speed and a slight boost along top of that movement speed. Weeping can then pull out the rocket to help him with transition kiting or to help outrun you, so that you don't deal any damage or get any of your presence. The second way he can use his rockets is the more aggressive version, is he can use his rockets to stun you and help free people from the balloon or slow you down so that he can perform actions such as rescuing from the rocket share. Knowing what rocket will be good for what situation can help with dealing with a Weeping Clown, because if you know that he's been using his rockets exclusively for boosting and he doesn't have any rockets to aid for helping survivors off a rocket chair, you can exploit that. If he's been saving his rockets and he hasn't been using it for kiting, it's most likely meaning that he's going to go for a more aggressive rockets. Knowing exactly, getting into the mind of a Weeping Clown to know what kind of rockets he can use and what kind of rockets he's trying to lean towards can help you set up a bunch of baits and can help down the Weeping Clown like you will deal with most stunners. The only issue with Weeping Clown when he is the one that's trying to harass you and trying to save people is that his rocket is not like most of the stunners. Weeping Clown's rocket will detonate if he so chooses. He can release the rocket to help stun on the first object it comes in contact with. And since your Phantom classifies as a wall, this means that he can actually use your Phantom as the wall, cause the rocket to explode, and make it so that you will be the one dropping the survivor. So if you really want to deal with a Weeping Clown, you need to know if he's using his rockets for transition, if he's using his rockets to aid his teammates, or if he's using his rockets to harass you. And then once you understand what kind of rockets he's tending to lean towards or what rockets he has been using, you can help eliminate some of the rockets that he can no longer use. And when he goes to try to use an aggressive rocket, try to give him a very risky shot, whether by forcing him to keep moving with the Phantom or just trying to push him away from the survivor on the ground. Whether or not he can actually shoot it will be an incredibly different story depending on how good or bad the Weeping Clown is. But just making sure that he cannot have a good enough opportunity to launch that rocket onto you can help in dealing with Weeping Clowns. Professor, in my opinion, you cannot counter his ability. And no, I do not mean by, oh, he is the perfect counter for Hellember. If there's a Hellember player on the field, everyone needs to go Professor, because he's the be-all counter to him. No, I mean by that is, his gimmick will always be in effect, and depending on the Professor, it can either be a very slightly annoying ability, or it could be the absolute bane of your existence. The reason I say this is because of his actual gimmick itself, and that is the Scale Shield. He also has the ability to drop the Scale Shields as well, but since they act as a weaker version of the Professor's scales, just assume that I am talking about both, unless I specify that it's exclusive to Professor. So when Professor pops his scales, it basically acts like a parry. For 1 second, he will be immune to all of your basic attacks. Due to how Hellember can only perform basic attacks, he basically becomes immune to all damage for 1 second. And that right there is why I really say that you can't really counter a Professor. If a Professor is just as cool-headed as you are, trying to force him to pop a scale might be a little bit challenging. But at the other end of the scale, funny, if the Professor pops his shield at any sign of danger, you pretty much just get a free kill. The real reason to counter a Professor is to get in his head, but this depends on the actual player itself, and that is why I really say you cannot counter a Professor, because in order to counter the Professor, you have to counter the Professor, and every Professor is different. And even then, if you fight the same Professor over and over and over again, he's gonna start catching on. But how do you try to deal with a Professor's scales? And how do I get the Professors who pop at the sign of danger to start using those shields very quickly? Well, in order to do that, you need to make your swings believable. Now, what do I mean by making your fake swings believable? Here's how it will work. There's the wind-up, and then there's the actual attack. When Hellember is going for the wind-up, right before he actually swings down his weapon, you act like you're about to attack him normally. At the last moments before the attack actually counts, well, this window may be a little bit more lenient if you're fighting an actual Professor. You quickly flick your screen and turn Leo 180 degrees. If you make this attack look very believable, and you get into the Professor's head, he may pop the scale and you don't get stunned. Or, if you fail, you will hit the scale and you will be put into the recovering animation of hitting the scale, which is different from the actual hit animation. If you are fighting against a normal survivor, you only have to do this once, but if you're going against a professor, you have to either wait 8 seconds or you have to try to bait him out a second time. So, how do you truly counter a professor? The best way to counter a professor is just like a normal parry, is to get him to pop the parry when you are going for a fake out, in which you have to make your fake out very believable. If you make your parry too obvious, he's just not going to believe it, and if you go too far, you'll end up actually hitting him, and then he will get value, and I mean a lot of value, from his shields, as it will also push you back. Antiquarian. Okay, Antiquarian is a very scary harasser if she gets the jump on you, and I mean very scary. She can perform 2 versions of a sweep, a poke, and she can jump. Let's talk about the actual sweeps themselves, then I'll go to the poke, then I will go to the leap. Antiquarian has her flute staff, and she can be able to perform a left or right swing. The swings themselves travel in a long sweeping motion to either the left or right direction depending on what she uses. Both the left and right direction have their own cooldown, so if she swings to the left, she can still swing to the right. Now, whenever she hits you with one of these sweeps, she will send you flying in that specific direction. She can also perform a poke, which the hitbox is a bit narrower, doesn't swing very far off to the side. It's often used to combo either the second time she goes for her ability, or to push you back into a wall when she has a perfect opportunity of line of sight. And then she has the vault, in which she uses her staff to leap herself into the air, vaulting over small obstacles, just like how Acrobat would. The 3 different attacks from the Antiquarian also, if you hit a wall, not only will they stun you for a short second, but then she will also apply stacks of disarm. If she hits you with one of her attacks, you'll be put into a small amount of disarmed, and then if she hits you with all 3 stacks, you will be disarmed for quite a long time, as she will gain additional disarm every time she hits you with a staff swing. If she hits you with all 3 iterations of the staff swing, you will be put into a massive disarm state that she can combo with, and this is very devastating. Now, most of you might be saying, it's like, oh, just use the phantoms and the puppets. Well, that's the bad part. Antiquarian's flute staff affects you and all of your summons at the same time. While the phantoms and the puppets may be stronger than you, as they do not get afflicted with the stuns or the disarms, they will still be pushed back and still being able to be disoriented just like you. But if you can try to go for a phantom attack with the Antiquarian, the best way to do it is to make sure that both you or the summon of the phantom or the puppet are attacking from 2 separate directions. This makes it so that the Antiquarian has to choose who to swing at. Or better yet, make her try to use another one of her abilities while trying to deal with both of you. The reason that the sweep is very important, more than the poke sometimes, is that the poke can be used on a single target better, but because you guys will always keep rushing with you in the phantom or your puppets, Antiquarian needs to use the sweep to cover a lot of distance to try to snag both of you. So, making it so that one of you is always outside of her swing range, or making it so that it's impossible to get both of you in a single swing, will allow Antiquarian to open herself up for any additional strikes. She may also gain an ability to spin her staff to get a small speed boost. But compared to what I just recently said, I feel like it would be better to focus on the sweeps, the jab, and the vault. So how do you truly counter an Antiquarian? First off, learn how to position yourself and your phantom very efficiently. If you pair yourself way too closely, one single sweep can knock you both out, rendering you and the phantom completely useless, as she can then deal with just the phantom while you're under the disarm effect. Pair yourself too far away, and she can dodge one, staff the other, and completely run in to go for whatever objective she needs to take. But pair yourself close enough, and when she attempts to go for a swing, you might just have enough opportunity to deal some damage while she is actually in the swing animation. Composer fundamentally changes how decoding works. And no, I do not mean that he has a super broken decoding speed that makes every single survivor obsolete. No, what I mean is, while most survivors are too busy scrolling on their phone hoping that they get the glorious cipher machine calibration so they can finally get a hit of dopamine, Composer is actually playing a full-on rhythm game whenever he decodes. This means Composer, whenever he's actively decoding, is dealing with an entirely new mini-game. Now you might be wondering, why do I need to know that he's playing an entirely separate mini-game when he is decoding? Well, that is just something to keep far in the back of your head, just so that you don't get absolutely bewildered when a Composer main is too busy spending his time trying to keep his 300 note combo rather than focusing on the survivor that just got down directly in front of him. Composer is related fully to music. His entire gimmick is music. His power is music. His ability is music. If he needs to do something, I would not be surprised if he has to hit a 7-note combo just to drink a glass of water. But here we are. Whenever a Composer wants to use his main ability of the speed boost, that same minigame will appear directly in front of him. It will then give him an easy set of notes, and every time he hits those notes, it will give him the slight speed boost until the end of his full charge. If he somehow misses the note, he will not get the speed boost. Keeping an eye on the Composer and what he is doing and making sure that he is actually mastering his ability is something you need to keep in the back of your mind. The only thing that you really need to deal with is his secondary speed boost, as Composer will be doing all the mental work himself, as while you might be able to interact with him, he is going to be too busy working on that additional DDR style minigame that maybe once in a blue moon a puppet might be able to smack him while he is actively clicking the buttons, because he may be working, but if he is actively doing something else, the puppet may just have enough time to deal with the swing. Journalist feels like looking into a warped mirror. It's kind of like some of the other survivors, it kind of feels like journalists looked at your abilities and just said, you know what, I'm going to take that. And it really shows in her main ability being Orphe, because I swear I feel like I've heard this before. Journalist's main ability is her camera, but for safety reasons and also for spotlight reasons, I'm going to permanently name the camera after what the actual ability should be named, Little Orphe. So when Orphe is deployed, journalists can have Orphe stand near a pallet, have him just run in a straight line, or rescue from a rocket chair. This depends on the actual camera's lenses. Journalist has 3 kiting lenses and 1 rescue lens, but the rescue lens can be turned into an additional kiting lens. So, how do you actually deal with Orphe? You thought I was going to say journalist. No, how do you deal with Orphe? As Orphe will make your life actually more painful than the journalist herself. Orphe will put himself behind a pallet, and every time you walk in front of it, he will immediately drop it on you. Or, this can allow journalists to perform a pocket double team without having to actually call on an additional survivor. This effectively will never allow you, when you fight a journalist for the first time, to truly be a 1v1. Because while you can be able to summon your phantom, journalists can immediately turn back the tide by summoning Orphe, effectively making this camp a 2v2. This can also make it so that you don't have the numbers advantage anymore, as you can take out Orphe, the phantom will then attack journalist, and maybe you won't have enough time to actually hit her. Or you would be forced to have to stall out an extra bit of time to make sure that Orphe didn't rescue on the rocket chair. Journalists can also use Orphe to body block while in chase, effectively turning him into a personal shield or a AI harasser. You can tell where Orphe is going because he goes by very strict pathfinding. You will hear the journalist camera do a little click and Orphe will start running. Orphe will always run in a straight line with slight curves when he turns a corner, but it will always be in straight lines to the pallet or the rocket chair. He will never try to mind game you, and he will go directly to his objective. Most journalist mains, just like you, learn how to optimize and play around the AI and not have the AI play around them. And this is very crucial. Maybe they'll have the Orphe run to a pallet that you guys will know that you will have to run through, making it so that Orphe will provide a lot of extra time. If you are going through a transition, they might have Orphe play as a secondary shield, giving them an additional movement speed, allowing them to transition kite or take the hit for them. The thing with Orphe as well is that anytime he gets down, journalists will get a massive speed boost for a few seconds instead of going to mourn for Orphe. So how do you truly deal with Orphe and the journalist? Well, their pairing is a little bit complicated, but the best way to do it is to watch where Orphe is and to treat it like a 2v2, as journalist effectively has an AI harasser who can aid her in combat. And also, Orphe cannot use mind games. So if you just walk into the pallet and you then double back, he will slam the pallet directly in front of you and then disappear. You can also counter her AI teammate with your AI teammate by having the Phantom trigger Orphe and then breaking the pallet that Orphe immediately dropped. So it all depends on who really uses their AI companion better. Aeroplanist. Aeroplanist can fly through the sky once, but his main ability is his jetpack. Whenever he is going to use his jetpack, he will get 3 different variations of boosts. Why do you need to know that? Well, because the pro Aeroplanist mains may be able to control it, but the new Aeroplanist mains will be going in completely random directions. Let's assume that the Aeroplanist is the former. Aeroplanist will then use his 3 boosts to make up a bunch of distance from you. Or he can use the hover ability to fly in the air and then use his boosts. If you are nearby him when he uses his boost, you'll be pushed back a small tiny bit. But the main issue with Aeroplanist is in fact his movement speed. So always be ready to be able to counteract his sudden speed with either a puppet or just very optimized movement. Now, a small additional thing to all the newer Hell Embers, or somebody who's fighting against an Aeroplanist who may not know what they are doing. They will fly in completely random directions. If they don't fully understand his jetpack ability, they might just fly directly into a wall, directly into the food cart, and then directly into you. While most of the time you are dealing with an Aeroplanist who knows the actual game plan to deal with the randomized abilities, effectively giving him 3 controllable speed boosts, you would be surprised if someone in the heat of the moment misclicks and flies directly into the wall. But the best way to counter it is just with a lot of coverage with your puppets and just making sure that you can be able to cover back up the distance that the Aeroplanist chooses to give you. Cheerleader. Cheerleader has the ability to gain a speed. Wait a minute. A music-based survivor who has the ability to dash. Nah, I don't think I've ever heard that one before. Anyway, in all seriousness, Cheerleader is a very good support character in the right hands. And against you, it will be a little bit more devastating. Cheerleader has 3 separate abilities. Each of them are very strong individually, but together they make Cheerleader. She can use her pom-poms to cheer on her teammates. This gives them stacks of motivation. Once they get enough motivation, they can perform a dash, just like how Cheerleader will perform her dash, including the 2 seconds of slowness. If they get to a set amount of morale, they can able to pick themselves up from the ground, which will be stated now. The next ability, as I said previously, is that she can perform a dash. When she dashes, she will perform the dash as normal, but she will then become very tired and sleepy and slow her movement speed down for a few seconds. This is so she doesn't completely leave you in the dust. And the last portion of her ability is she can help reduce the cooldowns of all of her teammates. This also includes her ability, meaning that she can effectively use her dash twice. Knowing when she uses her ability knowing when she uses her cheer and knowing when she actually resets the ability of her teammates is crucial to dealing with a cheerleader. So how do you truly counter her then? Well, to truly counter a cheerleader, you need to know the dash and when it ends, in which you can tell because she will become slowed. If she resets the abilities of her teammate, which will be very obvious as because she will have a giant glowing symbol above their head of her giving her little cheer, and then you will hear a loud echo if the survivor is nearby you when they get their abilities reset. And finally, it will be very obvious to tell if she's actively cheering for them because you can look at her health bar. Not the survivor herself, but the survivor she is actively cheering for. Or you can see the cheerleader shaking the pom-poms as if she's trying to cheer on the survivor, which is very obvious the survivor you're chasing. Cheerleader does need to be nearby the survivor she's cheering for, so if the survivor is actively being cheered, you will know that the cheerleader is also nearby. And you also need to make sure that you don't down them after the set amount of cheers, because if you down them afterwards and you're unprepared, they will get back up because of the morality boost, and you have to re-down them once again. Puppeteer. Puppeteer has the ability to become Lis, and when he does, he spends some of his health to block an attack, basically. So, how does his ability truly work? Well, Puppeteer has the ability to turn into Lis, and when he does, he will then lose some of his HP. Now you might be wondering, what does he gain from spending that additional HP? Well, when he spends his HP, he becomes Lis, as I have stated previously. And when he does, any attack that he has recently spent his health would instantly just activate. So, Puppeteer is essentially gambling his HP and giving you an IOU, as the damage that he spent for his ability then becomes the damage that was received to him. But the thing is, he can additionally parry one of your attacks, and this is for any time he plays Lis. So you have a survivor who has the ability to be damaged less than a normal survivor, and anytime he uses that ability, he can gain an additional ability to parry one of your attacks. This seems on paper very crazy, and it kind of is a very annoying ability, especially since you're facing Embalmer. Because the Puppeteer is fighting you as a Embalmer, your only source of damage is from basic attacks, which means that he gets an ability to disable your attacks for a second, like a parry, and anytime he will spend his HP and you deal the damage, it will then become official, meaning he loses less HP than our normal basic attack. He does have one very crucial weakness though, is that whenever he spends too much HP, he has to heal himself back up. But he cannot heal himself back up by any normal means. No, the only way for him to heal himself back up is by healing another survivor. He cannot be healed by syringe, he cannot be healed by another survivor healing him, he has to heal someone else. And when he heals them, he then gains the HP at the same time. This on paper sounds like a very hefty drawback, but versus a Hellember, this drawback is a lot more exploitable than it seems on paper, as Hellember's main gimmick is to control the map with his puppets or his phantom. The puppets can be used to keep track on what survivor is performing what action. If there's a survivor on the rocket chair, a survivor being chased by you, and maybe an additional puppet might have caught another survivor running, you essentially found 75%. And since you have found the rest of the 3 survivors, this automatically proves that Puppeteer will no longer be gaining HP, as in order for him to gain HP, he has to go for the full healing animation. So if you're actively having all 3 survivors performing an action, you essentially lock Puppeteer out from gaining any extra health. While some survivors can use a item chest, so single-handedly grab a syringe to heal themselves up, Puppeteer is locked out of that ability. So, how do you truly counter a Puppeteer? Well, the easiest thing to do is to limit his ability to even interact with other survivors. This will make it so that if he does spend too much of his HP on Lis, he cannot gain it back, essentially meaning he is wounded for the majority of the game. This makes it so that the next time you catch him, he will just be a single hit away from down. If he is also at too low of an HP, this also completely nullifies his ability. So, all you really need to do against a Puppeteer is to just whittle down his HP and then just make sure he doesn't have the ability to regain his HP by keeping track of all of his teammates. Fire Investigator. Fire Investigator has the ability to summon airbags to help defend himself or boost his team. Starting with the aggressive version of the airbags, when he deploys an airbag, he can essentially make a wall for himself. This will prevent you from going where he is entering until you break it with a fully charged attack. In places where there's only one entrance or exit, this can be very crucial because you will be forced to have to spend the extra time fully breaking the airbag. Or you have to go and take a long detour just to try to fight the Fire Investigator. If you are hit by the airbag, you will also be pushed back. He also has a secondary variation of his airbag that he can use at the same time. When Fire Investigator or his teammates run into an already inflated airbag, they can gain a boost of speed. This boost of speed pretty much interacts the same way of a Mercenary's elbow pad. So, you have a survivor that can basically summon portable pallets, portable walls basically, able to speed up his teammates, and also, because of the variation of his ability, breaks your own AI. So, how do you deal with a Fire Investigator and their airbags? Well, the first thing is to care for your allies. You may be asking, why should I care for my puppets and my phantom? And the best part to that is they cannot interact with the airbags, and it will be classified as a bad space, meaning they will go to great lengths to try to walk around it. This also will mess with their pathing. So if they are trying to go for a more quick route, but that point is blocked with a airbag, they won't try to sneak around the airbag or take the time to break it. They'll just completely walk around it, probably go for a very large detour. But this detour can also lead them to be outside of the radius of their sight, essentially putting them back into wandering mode. If you don't want the puppets to be taking long detours or getting confused on where to go, breaking a airbag that keeps constantly messing with their pathing could be really good. If you don't want to deal with the fire investigator's airbags, he does have a set amount. So if you break the airbags, he will slowly begin to lose his ability until he eventually fully runs out. And the last thing to countering a fire investigator is just because the airbag did not get value in the first second that he tossed it out does not mean it will not get value. If the airbag is on the ground, they can still use the secondary ability of the dash to get that additional value. So always be sure you know where the airbags are. If you want to break the airbags, to remove his ability and the movement speeds of the bouncing gimmick, and to always watch your puppets and your phantoms sometimes to make sure their AI doesn't get broken by the fire investigator placing some really precise airbags. Fero Lady. Fero Lady, I have not really seen a lot of Fero Ladies, but I have played against a couple of them, and her main ability is that she can make a decoy trail. And whenever you are in chase with her, she will go completely invisible. And I do mean completely invisible. Instead of her normal blood trail, she will make a bright glowing trail behind herself. The exact same trail her decoy will emit when she uses her additional ability. So, the key thing to find a Fero Lady is to figure out where she actually is. If you do happen to catch the wrong trail, she will make a loud alert, but you will get a lot of distance put between you and the Fero Lady. So you do need to cover that distance back up. But with a lot of invisible based survivors, your puppets and your phantoms will be really good at dealing with it, as they will not be affected as much by the invisibility as you will be. Using your phantom to track the Fero Lady instead will make her ability completely useless, as due to it being an AI, it does not need to go by context clues to try to guess who the real Fero Lady truly is. It just needs to know where the Fero Lady's location is, and it cannot be disabled by just truly going invisible. So this allows the puppets or the phantom to be amazing vision for you to deal with Fero Ladies. With a lot of invisibility based powers, your phantoms and your puppets will be the front runners, and you will most likely be either confused or you gotta have to play off of their movements to know where her true location really lies. So if you want to really counter a Fero Lady, let the puppets do the job for you, or let the phantom track her down. And finally, we have Night. And Night, in my opinion, has a really cool power that fundamentally will never be not getting value. And what is his main ability? His ability is tactical foresight, and this allows him to try to predict your actions. This will fundamentally teach you to think outside the box. If you become too predictable, Knight will mop the floor with you. But if you get inside a Knight's head, you will mop the floor with him. So it becomes who gets inside the brain of their opponent a lot better. And due to your very basic tendencies, most people got a stereotype already attached to you. This could end up leaning in your favor very greatly, as due to the nature of your abilities, you can actually break through his foresight at an incredibly fast rate before he can even summon all of his predictions. If he thinks that you're going to go for a quick basic attack, you can quickly summon your Phantom, which will then tactically count as an ability, bypassing the Knight's ability, and then before he can activate his secondary one, you can go for a swing and then just down him. If you think that he's gonna go for an ability, you can quickly swing, and then you can then use your ability because he doesn't have enough time or he used up all of his predictions, which you easily broke through. Now, you do get penalized if he actually does predict your actions. If you attack him and he is predicted basic attack, it will be blocked and you will be stunned for a few seconds. And he will run away. If you use your ability and he predicts it, you will then lose your ability for a few seconds. And this means all of your abilities. He also has a special third prediction, but this is only if you have already broken through his first line of predictions, and that is stalemate. What is stalemate? Nothing. If you do nothing while he is in his second prediction, and he correctly guesses that, he will gain a short shield. But he also has an actual secondary ability, and that is he can place down his sword to help free a survivor from a slight distance away. If he does rescue someone in this way, they will gain a shield to help block some damage off of them. If you see Knight trying to attempt to go for this, you can try to down him and try to get a terror shock if he tries to go for it. But the best way to truly counter a Knight is be very unpredictable. He has to try to predict what you will do, not what he wants you to do. You can always just do something very strange and out the box against a Knight. If he thinks that you're going to go for a main ability and you just randomly throw out a swing, you completely bypass his ability, and vice versa. Due to how quickly you can spawn and then dispel your Phantom, this allows you to essentially use your ability for nothing. While you can quickly spawn to activate his ability foresight, dispel it, you then can gain back the fury that you spent by continuing to chase the Knight. And with that, thank you so much for watching. This was an incredibly difficult video to get out due to the fact of having to think of all the survivor habits, what their abilities do, how they all interact with the three individual summons of Embalmer, the Phantom, and the puppets, and then just how the survivor mains usually tend to act as well. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and if you do want more of these longer form contents, please let me know, because likes and comments will make sure that I know that you guys want to see more of this. But with that, this is Toylawyer. Hope you like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, this has been the Book of Leo.